What if I told you that the secret to compound interest has nothing to do with getting rich and everything to do with buying back your own life? Most of us have been spoon-fed a fundamental lie about money since we were children. We're told that the primary goal of investing is to amass a gigantic pile of cash so that someday we can finally stop working. We're conditioned by society to view compound interest purely as a tool for extreme material wealth. We see it as a mathematical magic trick designed to fund luxury lifestyles. But that perspective is entirely backwards, and it completely misses the existential point of what capital actually represents. Money isn't just paper, and it certainly isn't a scoreboard for your ego. When you finally understand the mathematics of wealth, you realize that money is essentially stored energy. And more importantly, money is stored time. It's a literal representation of the hours of your life that you've traded to the world. Here's the harsh truth. Every time you spend your entire paycheck on things that rapidly lose value, you aren't just losing dollars. You're actively giving away future days and entire years of your personal autonomy. You're locking yourself into a rigid schedule. You're binding your existence to an alarm clock and handing over the best years of your life just to keep the lights on. But what happens when you stop looking at your retirement account as a distant concept and start seeing it as a literal time machine? Every single dollar you set aside today and allow to compound over the years is a direct down payment on your future freedom. It's quite literally a day of your life that you just successfully bought back from the traditional workforce. The math doesn't lie. When your money makes money, that's income you don't have to trade your physical labor to acquire. As your investments grow and compound over decades, your capital begins to work infinitely harder than you ever could. Your money doesn't need to sleep for 8 hours a night, it doesn't take weekends off, and it never asks for a vacation. It just silently multiplies in the background. We've built a chaotic culture that's obsessed with the outward aesthetic of wealth. People desperately want the least luxury cars and the overpriced designer clothes just to signal to strangers that they're successful. But wealth is what you don't see. True wealth is the invisible shield of financial security. It's the quiet confidence that allows you to wake up and decide exactly how you want to spend your day. Throughout this video, we're going to deconstruct the exact mathematics of how compound interest effectively buys back your life. We'll look past the generic financial advice and dig into the deep psychology of why we trade so much of our precious time for things that simply don't matter. We'll explore specific financial milestones that act as immediate off-ramps from the relentless modern rat race. The ultimate goal of personal finance isn't to die with the highest possible number in your bank account. The real goal is to reach a crossover point where your money sustains your baseline existence. Prepare to unlearn everything you thought you knew about saving. Once you see compound interest as a direct mechanism for time freedom, your entire life trajectory will change forever. Let's look closely at two men living in the same city, separated only by a few miles, but living in entirely different universes. On the surface, they represent the classic definition of success versus mediocrity that society loves to push. But when we pull back the curtain on their actual lives, the reality of their situations will force you to question everything you've been taught about what it means to be wealthy. Marcus is a senior corporate director pulling in over $200,000 a year. He's the guy everyone assumes has life completely figured out. He drives a brand new leased luxury SUV that smells like fresh leather. His tailored suits are immaculate, and his house is a sprawling architectural masterpiece in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Marcus has won the status game. He's acquired all the correct symbols of modern prosperity. But behind the perfectly curated exterior, a very different story is unfolding. Here's the harsh truth. Marcus is drowning in social debt. Every single dollar of his massive income is spoken for before the direct deposit even hits his checking account. The mortgage, the lease payments, and the relentless pressure to maintain appearances consume everything he earns. He's a prisoner of his own manufactured lifestyle. Because his expenses are astronomical, Marcus has zero control over his time. He works 60 hours a week, constantly checking emails during family dinners. If Marcus were to lose his job, his entire life would financially collapse within 90 days. He's terrified of his boss and completely trapped in a golden cage. Now, consider David. David is a middle school history teacher who makes $60,000 a year. David drives a 12-year-old sedan with a dent in the bumper. He lives in a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet, unassuming suburb. He packs his lunch in Tupperware every single day and buys clothes on clearance. To the untrained eye, David looks entirely unremarkable. He looks like someone who never made it to the big leagues. But wealth is what you don't see. What you don't see is that David started investing 20% of his modest income the day he got his first paycheck in his early 20s. While Marcus was busy upgrading his lifestyle with every promotion, David was quietly buying back his future. For 2 decades, David let the magic of compound interest work silently in the background. His portfolio has grown so substantially that his investments now generate more passive growth than he makes from teaching. David could walk into his principal's office tomorrow, hand in his resignation, and his family's standard of living wouldn't drop by a single penny. He teaches because he loves the kids, not because he needs the paycheck. When the district asked him to take on exhausting extra administrative duties, David simply smiled and said no. That 2-letter word is the ultimate luxury. Marcus, despite his massive salary, can't afford to say no to anyone. David, with his dented car, has complete autonomy over his calendar. Marcus trades his finite life energy for status symbols, while David traded his early dollars to purchase absolute freedom. The contrast between these two men shatters the illusion of the modern workforce. A high salary means absolutely nothing if your lifestyle inflation forces you to surrender your autonomy. If your income goes up, but your required working hours go up alongside it, you aren't getting wealthier. You're just upgrading the padding inside your cell. Most of us are raised with a very specific and unquestioned script about how our adult lives are supposed to unfold. We are taught to go to school, get a decent job, and work continuously until we hit the magic age of 65. Savings are treated as an afterthought in this equation. You pay your bills, buy your groceries, maybe treat yourself to a weekend trip, and whatever tiny scrap of cash is left over at the end of the month goes into a retirement account. This script normalizes the depressing idea that freedom is something you only get to experience when you are old and physically exhausted. But let us look at the mathematical reality of what happens when you flip that script completely upside down. When you start investing early, you are not just putting money away for old age, you are literally buying a time machine. The math of compound interest is hard for the human brain to intuitively grasp because we think in linear terms, but wealth grows exponentially. If you invest $10,000 in your 20s and it grows at a standard market rate, it doubles roughly every 9 or 10 years. By the time you are 50, that single early investment has turned into nearly $80,000 without you lifting a single finger. Here is the harsh truth. You have to stop looking at that $80,000 as just paper money. You need to look at it as stored time. If your baseline living expenses are $40,000 a year, that single investment you made in your 20s just bought you 2 entire years of freedom in your 50s. 2 full years where you do not have to set an alarm clock, sit in useless meetings, or commute in heavy traffic. Every early dollar you invest is a tireless worker that you are sending out into the world to buy back your future hours. This requires a massive mindset shift in how we interact with the world around us. We are conditioned to look at the price tag of an item and think about it solely in terms of dollars and cents. But when you finally understand the time machine of compound interest, you realize that dollars are the completely wrong unit of measurement. The true cost of anything is the amount of life you have to trade to acquire it, and the future time you are giving up by not investing those funds. Imagine you are walking through a retail store and you see a brand new $2,000 television. The societal script tells you to look at your checking account, see that the money is there, and assume you can easily afford it. But if you take home $20 an hour after taxes, that television actually costs you 100 hours of your actual life. You are trading 2.5 weeks of your finite existence on this planet for a piece of electronics that will be obsolete in 4 short years. It gets much worse when you factor in the opportunity cost of your time freedom. If you had taken that $2,000 and put it into a broad market index fund, compound interest would have turned it into roughly $16,000 over 3 decades. If your monthly expenses in the future are $4,000, that television did not just cost you 100 hours today. It literally cost you 4 entire months of early retirement in your future. This is exactly why someone like Marcus is trapped in the rat race, while someone like David is totally free. Marcus looks at money as a tool to buy immediate comfort and status, constantly borrowing against the years he has not even lived yet. Every time he leases a new luxury car, he signs away another year to the corporate grind. David understands that the ultimate flex is autonomy. The moment you make this mindset shift, you stop being a passive consumer and become an active architect of your timeline, buying back your own life one day at a time. Society trains us to view survival through a single, very fragile lens. We're taught that a bi-weekly paycheck is the only barrier between us and complete financial ruin. From our very first part-time job, the equation is drilled into our heads that physical labor equals survival. If you stop working, the money stops flowing, and your life falls apart. This deeply ingrained fear is what keeps millions of people chained to desks and miserable jobs for 4 decades. We look at our monthly bills, the rent, the groceries, the utilities, and we see a mountain that must be climbed every single month from scratch. We believe we're the absolute only engine capable of pulling our financial train up that steep mountain. But there's a hidden milestone in the journey of wealth building that radically alters this equation. It's a mathematical threshold known as the crossover point. This isn't a fuzzy, abstract idea about feeling rich or buying luxury goods. It's a hard, calculated moment in time when the passive growth generated by your investments officially exceeds your baseline living expenses. Let's break down the mathematical reality slowly. The math doesn't lie. In the personal finance world, there's a concept often called the 4% rule, which helps determine your safe withdrawal rate. Historically, if you have a broadly diversified portfolio of low-cost index funds, you can withdraw roughly 4% of its total value every single year, adjusting for inflation, without ever depleting the principal balance over a 30-year period. To find your specific crossover point, you simply take your annual living expenses and multiply them by 25. If you figure out that you need $40,000 a year to live a comfortable, happy life, your target number is $1 million. Once your investment accounts hit that specific number, a profound shift occurs in the physical universe of your personal finances. At that exact moment, your money becomes an entirely self-sustaining ecosystem. If your portfolio grows by an historical average of 7 to 10% a year, and you only need 4% to live, your capital is now working significantly harder than you are. Your portfolio is clocking in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It never gets sick, it never burns out, and it never needs a vacation. Reaching the crossover point triggers the ultimate psychological paradigm shift. Up until this moment, you worked because you absolutely had to. You traded your finite time to an employer simply to survive the month and keep a roof over your family's head. But the day you cross this financial threshold, your physical survival is no longer dependent on your daily labor or your manager's approval. You still might choose to work, and many financially independent people do. But you aren't working for survival anymore. You're working strictly by choice, on your own terms. If your corporate culture becomes toxic, or if you simply decide you want to spend the next 6 months painting, volunteering, or traveling with your kids, you have the ultimate power to walk away. You've officially replaced your own physical labor with the compounding labor of your invested capital. This is the exact moment you truly understand that wealth is what you don't see. True wealth isn't the flashy leased car in the driveway or the oversized mortgage. It's the invisible, tireless army of invested dollars working silently in the background to pay your electricity bill and buy your groceries. The crossover point is the specific day when you transition from a trapped wage earner to a totally free human being. The societal script surrounding retirement is built on a narrative of relentless, uninterrupted exhaustion. From the moment we enter the workforce in our early 20s, we are told that we must constantly set aside a large portion of our income every single month, without ever stopping. The traditional financial industry expects us to keep our foot firmly pressed against the savings gas pedal for 40 straight years. We are conditioned to believe that if we miss a single year of maxing out our retirement accounts in our 30s or 40s, our entire financial future will crumble into dust. This rigid expectation assumes that our energy levels, our career ambitions, and our personal desires will remain exactly the same for 4 straight decades. It completely ignores the brutal reality of corporate burnout. It ignores the fact that by the time many people reach their mid-30s, they are desperately exhausted by the endless ladder climbing and the toxic office politics. They want out, but they feel chained to their high salary because they believe they have to keep aggressively funding their retirement accounts until they turn 65. Enter the concept of Coast Financial Independence, or Coast FI. This is a mathematical milestone that completely shatters the traditional timeline of the middle-class grind. It is the single most powerful tool for buying back the prime decades of your life. Coast FI is the exact mathematical point where you have front-loaded enough money into your investment accounts at an early age that you never have to contribute another single cent toward your traditional retirement. Let us break down the mathematical reality so you can truly visualize how this time machine works. The math does not lie. Imagine you are disciplined and you manage to invest $100,000 into broadly diversified index funds by the time you reach age 30. Historically, the stock market has returned an average of roughly 8 to 10% per year over long periods. At a conservative 8% growth rate, your invested capital will double approximately every 9 years. So, let us track that single $100,000 portfolio. By age 39, it grows to $200,000. By age 48, it doubles again to $400,000. By age 57, it hits $800,000. And by the standard retirement age of 66, that original investment has grown to $1.6 million. This entire massive snowball effect happens entirely in the background, strictly through the silent labor of compound interest. Here is the harsh truth that the traditional financial industry rarely discusses. If you achieve that early milestone by age 30, you have already won the game of traditional retirement. From age 31 onward, your old age is entirely fully funded. You do not ever need to save another dollar for the future. You have officially achieved Coast FI, which means you get to step off the gas pedal entirely and simply coast. The mindset shift that accompanies Coast FI is absolutely staggering. Once you hit this number, your required baseline income drops dramatically. You no longer need to earn a massive corporate salary that covers your living expenses plus a 20% savings rate. You only need to earn enough money to cover your basic day-to-day living expenses. The intense, suffocating pressure to constantly climb the corporate ladder evaporates overnight. This is exactly how you buy back the middle decades of your life. Instead of grinding through your 30s and 40s as a stressed-out executive working 60 hours a week, you have the mathematical permission to downshift. You can take a drastically lower-paying job that carries zero stress. You could work at a local bookstore, become a barista, teach art classes, or launch a small passion business that barely breaks even. Because you are no longer worried about funding your 60s and 70s, you can completely focus on optimizing your life for joy and low stress right now. You are no longer trading your sanity for future security, because your younger self already paid for your future security. Coast FI transforms compound interest from a distant, boring concept into an immediate stress relief valve. It gives you the ultimate power to reclaim your prime years and design a life you actually want to live today. There's a deeply embedded societal script that dictates where we're allowed to exist. You must live exactly where the high-paying jobs are located. This unwritten rule forces millions of intelligent, hardworking people to flock to major metropolitan hubs where the cost of living is astronomical. We sign leases for tiny apartments with exorbitant rent, and we accept massive mortgages that stretch our budgets to the breaking point. We accept the brutal reality of an expensive zip code as an unavoidable tax on our ambition. This creates a vicious cycle that keeps us trapped in the rat race. You get a promotion, but your property taxes go up. You earn a bonus, but the cost of groceries in your elite city absorbs every single penny. It's like running on a treadmill that constantly speeds up every time you catch your breath. If your geographic location mandates top-tier expenses just to survive, you're no closer to freedom than someone making a fraction of your income in a cheaper town. This brings us to one of the most powerful cheat codes in wealth building. It's a concept known as geographic arbitrage. At its core, geographic arbitrage is the deliberate act of completely disconnecting where you earn your money from where you spend your money. It's the realization that a dollar holds a vastly different amount of physical purchasing power depending on the exact GPS coordinates where you choose to spend it. Let's look at the mathematical reality, because the math doesn't lie. Imagine you're living in a coastal city like New York or San Francisco. To maintain a comfortable middle-class lifestyle, you might calculate that you need $100,000 a year in baseline expenses. If we apply the rule of 25, your required crossover point to reach financial independence is a staggering $2.5 million. That's an incredibly steep mountain to climb. Now, apply the leverage of geographic arbitrage. Suppose you make the conscious decision to relocate to a quieter Midwestern town, or perhaps you look internationally to lower-cost regions. In these areas, you can maintain the exact same quality of life for just $40,000 a year. The sunshine feels the exact same, the food is often fresher, and the pace of life is incredibly peaceful. Here's the harsh truth that most people miss when they look at those numbers. By simply packing your bags and changing your physical location, your required retirement target instantly drops from $2.5 million to just $1 million. You didn't have to secure a massive promotion or win the lottery. You literally erased $1.5 million of required capital from your life goal simply by changing your address. By doing this, you've effectively bought back 10 to 15 years of your working life in a single afternoon. That's the magic of geographic arbitrage as a time multiplier. The years you would have spent grinding in an office just to save that extra $1 million have been instantly returned to your timeline. You're fast-tracking your time freedom by artificially lowering the financial hurdle. Wealth is what you don't see. It isn't the prestige of holding a Manhattan address. It's the absolute freedom to wake up on a Tuesday morning in a low-cost region, knowing your modest portfolio covers every single expense. Executing this requires a massive reduction in your ego. You must be willing to trade the superficial social validation of an expensive zip code for the quiet reality of total autonomy. We are biologically wired as human beings to care deeply about our position in the social hierarchy. For our ancient ancestors, being accepted by the tribe was a literal matter of life and death. But in the modern world, this deeply ingrained survival instinct has been weaponized against us by brilliant marketing departments. We are constantly pressured to play the status game, an unwinnable psychological treadmill where the only prize is the fleeting envy of strangers. To participate in this game, millions of people willingly drown themselves in social debt. Social debt is much more dangerous than regular financial debt. It is the crushing psychological weight of having to maintain a manufactured image of success. Every time you buy a house that is slightly too big, or lease a car that requires a ridiculous monthly payment, you are not just spending money. You are signing a contract that forces you to continue working at maximum capacity just to fund the illusion. You owe the world a continuous performance. People justify this exhausting performance by telling themselves a very specific lie. They say they will finally stop playing the game and actually start living their lives when they reach traditional retirement at age 65. They view old age as a magical finish line where all of their delayed gratification will suddenly, finally, pay off. They hoard their wealth and their energy, believing that a massive bank account in their 70s is the ultimate reward for decades of stress. Here is the harsh truth. Time is the only truly non-renewable resource in the entire universe. You can always negotiate a higher salary, you can always start a new business, and you can always rebuild a shattered stock portfolio. But you can never, ever manufacture another healthy Tuesday in your 30s. You can never buy back the years your children were young. Every single day that passes is permanently subtracted from your ledger. This brings us to a beautiful concept called memory dividends, which completely rewrites how we should view our spending. In the world of finance, we know that money compounds over time, but experiences compound as well. When you take a meaningful trip or pursue a deep passion in your 20s or 30s, you do not just get the immediate joy of the experience. You get decades of remembering it, talking about it, and letting it shape your worldview. Those memories pay psychological dividends for the rest of your life. If you delay all of your living until you are old and frail, you completely rob yourself of the magic of memory dividends. You might finally have a massive pile of cash, but you will not have the time for those memories to compound. More importantly, you might no longer have the physical health or the mobility to do the things you spent 40 years dreaming about. Your physical capital naturally declines as your financial capital peaks. It is a devastating irony that the exact moment people finally feel financially secure enough to explore the world is often the exact moment their physical bodies begin to slow down. A massive bank account at age 80 is not a high score. If you sacrificed your health, your peace of mind, and your prime years to get it, it is actually a catastrophic failure of life optimization. We have to stop viewing the relentless accumulation of capital as the ultimate goal of human existence. The status game tells you that whoever dies with the most expensive toys wins. But the reality is that whoever dies with the most minimized regret wins. The ultimate tragedy of the modern era is not dying broke. The ultimate tragedy is arriving at the end of your timeline and realizing you spent your best years acting as a supporting character in someone else's idea of success. True financial planning requires a deep and sometimes painful level of introspection. It forces you to step off the treadmill of societal expectations and ask yourself what actually brings you joy, completely independent of what looks good on a social media feed. Once you realize that the status game is rigged, you can simply choose to stop playing. You can trade the heavy burden of social debt for the light, peaceful reality of living on your own terms. The ultimate goal of everything we have discussed today is to fundamentally redefine what it actually means to win the game of money. Winning isn't having the biggest house on the block or the most expensive watch on your wrist. Winning is waking up every single morning and knowing that your time belongs entirely to you. When you finally view compound interest as a time machine used to buy back your life, your entire relationship with money changes from one of anxiety to one of profound empowerment. In a society that's completely obsessed with visible consumption and endless upgrading, the real flex is freedom. It's the invisible luxury of an empty calendar on a random Tuesday afternoon. It's the ability to walk away from a toxic work environment without checking your bank balance first. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that your basic survival is completely decoupled from your physical labor. That level of deep, unshakable peace of mind is something that no luxury vehicle or designer label could ever provide. You have to remember the fundamental truth of personal finance. Money is theoretically infinite, but time is strictly finite. You can always find a way to make another dollar, but you can never, ever manufacture another hour. Every financial decision you make from this day forward should be passed through that exact filter. You need to ask yourself if you're trading your precious, non-renewable time for something that genuinely brings you joy, or if you're just trading it away to maintain a fleeting image of success in the eyes of strangers. Think back to the contrast between Marcus and David. Marcus has a massive salary and all the visible markers of wealth, but he's completely bankrupt when it comes to time and personal autonomy. He built a beautiful, leather-lined prison for himself out of social expectations and unchecked lifestyle inflation. David, on the other hand, built an invisible fortress of freedom out of early investments and delayed gratification. He understood early on that a modest life filled with endless choices is infinitely wealthier than an expensive life filled with relentless obligations. True financial independence ultimately boils down to the mastery of a single, incredibly powerful word: the ability to say no. When you have enough capital quietly compounding in the background, you get to say no to unreasonable demands from an employer. You get to say no to stressful projects that drain your energy. You get to say no to the relentless, exhausting pressure of the modern rat race. The capacity to safely and confidently say no is the most valuable asset you can ever acquire in your lifetime. The shift from the traditional societal script to this new reality doesn't happen overnight. It requires deliberate action, brutal honesty with yourself, and a massive amount of patience. It requires you to calculate your exact crossover point, understand the mechanical leverage of coast financial independence, and perhaps even consider the massive lifestyle hack of geographic arbitrage. But most importantly, it requires you to completely stop caring about what other people think of your lifestyle choices. You don't need a massive corporate salary or a lucky lottery ticket to achieve this. You just need consistent discipline and a fundamental shift in how you view the true purpose of capital. You have to start viewing every single dollar you save not as a painful restriction on your current life, but as a deliberate down payment on your future autonomy. Let your invested money do the heavy lifting in the background so you can focus your physical energy on building memory dividends and living a life entirely devoid of regret. If this video opened your eyes or gave you a new perspective, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments what your ideal future actually looks like, and make sure to subscribe for more. Remember, wealth isn't just a number in a bank account, it's the freedom to design your own life.